Hey, what's up, everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast for episode number 81, which we are going to delve into the Clinton Bodycount conspiracy. And this is a crazy conspiracy that when you look at the facts, it is incredibly hard to just dismiss this is just a simple conspiracy. Because either there's some dirty hands at play in the house of Bill and Hillary, or the deaths of people associated with them that either would be those who protected their secrets or would be their enemies. The body count is incredible, and it would have to be the greatest collection of coincidences known to mankind. Now, the important thing to note about the Clintons, whether you love them or hate them, they have been marred by controversy since the very, very beginning. When it comes to Bill, we all know that he has a proven history of sleeping with women and having girls on the side, and this is not, an uncommon thing for presidents, or in general men in power. But the thing about Bill is he seemed to be exceptionally sloppy about, covering his steps. And from the very beginning of his career, there have been multiple women long before Monica Lewinsky that have come forward. In fact, Bill is supposedly the father of a couple of love childs, I guess you can call them, in which there's currently one out there right now, a young black man that is trying to get Bill to submit to a DNA test. But with this story, the Clinton body count, what we're going to be talking about, it's just important to note that he has had a long history of trying to hide and cover up his sexual mishaps, I guess you could call it, on the side. Another big one is whitewater. This is somewhat complicated, but to shorten whitewater up, if you don't know what it is, please Google it. You can get into the nitty gritty and the dirt, the details of it all. But essentially, Bill and Hillary Clinton had a development company that they formed called Whitewater, in which their partners ran this Madison County Guarantee Savings and Loan Bank. And it appeared as though the bank was funneling money to the Clinton campaign, and to them personally. And the bank ended up actually failing and losing $60 million. And it was shut down by the feds, in which the Clintons, many believe they should be in jail for that scandal. But they were actually never charged with anything. Catherine McDougal, who ran the bank, she is in jail, or she did jail time. But many believe that the Clintons were basically playing dirty pool with this bank and their friend, and they used these funds for their own personal gain. But again, they were never charged with anything in a court of law. But a lot of people feel they should be. That's obviously one of the big scandals with the Clintons. There's been all kinds of scandals as far as where are they getting their campaign money over the years, and that's both with Hillary and with Bill. So that's definitely something that's always been an issue. But again, they've never been charged with anything, which either means they didn't do it or they did do it and they're damn good at covering the tracks. Which I think if you take a look and you spent as much time as I have reading about the Clinton controversies, I think, in my opinion, they're just really good at covering their tracks when it comes to business transactions. Where Bill gets sloppy is with his women. But another major conspiracy surrounding the Clintons is actually more surrounding Bill than Hillary. It is the Mena airport scandal, which this isn't as much as of a conspiracy now that it's been proven, but very much so after the fact. It's so long ago, no one could really do anything about it. But when Bill was the Attorney General of Arkansas and then the Governor of Arkansas, he had conspired with George Bush and Oliver North to allow the Mena airport to ship guns and cocaine from Escobar. Cocaine would come into the U.S., into Mena, Arkansas, and from there would be distributed. And the money that was made through a deal worked out with Escobar, and this was all through the CIA, would then be used to buy weapons, and those weapons would be shipped out to the Contras. Now, if you've seen the movie American Made with Tom Cruise plays the drug smuggler Barry Seal, who worked for both the CIA and for Pablo Escobar. And it was Barry Seal who was actually moving everything from explosives to cocaine to weapons down to the Contras in Costa Rica. So it was a big mess of all kinds of illegal shit that should have never happened. And the CIA was running all of this under the direction of Ronald Reagan, by the way, out of Mena, Arkansas, when Bill Clinton was the guy who basically made it all possible. He cut all the red tape and allowed this to happen. So there's a lot of conspiracies surrounding the Clintons. And when you're involved with that many conspiracies, obviously you're going to have a lot of people that know your secrets, a lot of people that have dirt on you. They would want to hope that these people would protect them, but they would have a lot of enemies too. Now, every time one of the Clintons run for office, and this dates back, I've been hearing about this Clinton Bodycount thing for decades, and every single time they run for office, the number grows, and the stories get bigger and bigger as to how many bodies there are. And during the presidential campaign, Hillary's last one, this story was floating around, but for some reason, the media and the press have never picked up on it, and I don't understand why. In a second here, I'm going to read you a lot of the bodies that have popped up and their relationships to Hillary and Bill. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why the media has not even looked into this, and why the law certainly hasn't looked into this. It's kind of easy to understand why the FBI and the CIA wouldn't look into it, because they would be seemingly involved. But I'm surprised that there hasn't even been a major, really credible journalist to go after this story. And maybe it's because, they fear what would happen to them if this story ever got to a mainstream level. But having said that, let's go over some of these deaths here, and you can decide if you think any of these are bizarre or weird. Now, as I go through these, try to keep in mind the past conspiracies that I mentioned earlier, okay, and the connections of these people, because it's kind of all over the place, but you can just tell me what you think. Let's start with James McDougal, okay? This was Clinton's convicted Whitewater partner. Now, he died of a heart attack when he was in solitary confinement. This could happen, right? People have heart attacks all the time. He's had a difficult time in his life. He's in solitary confinement. He's arrested. Life sucks. He has a heart attack. Okay, no problem. Mary Mahoney, she was a former White House intern that was murdered in July of 1997 at a Starbucks coffee shop in Georgetown. What's interesting about this is she was murdered right before she was going to go public with her story of sexual harassment in the White House, towards Bill specifically. Okay, Vince Foster, former White House counselor and colleague of Hillary Clinton at Little Rock's Rose Law Firm. He died of a gunshot wound to the head, in which it was ruled a suicide. Now remember that line, gunshot wound to the head, ruled a suicide, because as you will see here shortly, the Clintons know a lot of people that die of a gunshot wound to the head that was ruled a suicide. Okay, Ron Brown, the Secretary of Commerce and former DNC chairman, was reported to have died by impact in a plane crash. You'll hear this a lot too. A pathologist close to the investigation reported that there was a hole in the bottom of Brown's skull resembling a gunshot wound. At the same time of his death, Brown was being investigated and spoke publicly of his willingness to cut a deal with prosecutors. The rest of the people on the plane also died. A few days later, the only person that could have possibly known if something was weird with this flight, the air traffic controller, committed suicide. Now remember, he died supposedly by impact in a plane crash, but the autopsy said he was shot in the head. And again, the only person that would have known if anything was weird with the plane, the air traffic controller, commits suicide. But we're not done with weird plane crash deaths yet, okay? See Victor Razor II. Razor was a major player in the Clinton fundraising organization. He died in a plane crash in 1992, all right? These are two people now that have died in plane crashes. Paul Tolley, Democratic National Committee political director, was found dead in his hotel room in Little Rock on September of 1992. He was described by Clinton as a dear friend and a trusted advisor. So somebody close to him that was just found dead in a hotel room in Little Rock. Okay, moving on. And it's going to get real weird here, guys. Ed Wiley, a known Clinton fundraiser, was found dead in November of 1993 deep in the woods in Virginia of a gunshot wound to the head, ruled a suicide. But what's really bizarre here is that Wiley died on the same day that his wife, Kathleen Wiley, claimed that Bill Clinton groped her in the Oval Office in the White House. Now moving on. Jerry Parks, who was the head of Clinton's gubernatorial security team in Little Rock, was actually gunned down in his car while sitting at a deserted intersection outside of Little Rock. But check this out. Parks' son said that his father was building a dossier on Clinton. After he died, the files were mysteriously stolen from his house. And then there's James Bunch, who died from a gunshot wound to the head that was ruled a suicide. Supposedly, Bunch was about to come forward with a little black book that he had that listed the names of influential people who visited prostitutes in Texas and Arkansas, namely Bill Clinton. And then there's James Wilson, who is one of the investors in Whitewater. He was found dead in May of 1993 from an apparent hanging suicide. But check this one out. Kathy Ferguson, ex-wife of Arkansas trooper Danny Ferguson, was found dead in May of 1994 in her living room with a gunshot wound to the head that was ruled a suicide, even though they found several packed suitcases as though she was going somewhere. So who was Kathy Ferguson? Well, she was going to be a corroborating witness in the Paula Jones scandal. But the strangeness surrounding Kathy Ferguson's death doesn't stop there, as her Arkansas State Trooper fiancé, Bill Shelton, who was very public about the fact that he believed she was murdered and that she did not commit suicide, was found dead in June of 1994. How do you think Bill Shelton died? From a gunshot wound to the head, ruled a suicide, in which they found his body at Kathy Ferguson's gravesite. And then there's Gandy Baugh, who was the attorney for Bill Clinton's close friend Dan Lassiter, a convicted drug dealer. Out of the blue, for no reason, Baugh decided to take his own life in January of 1994 by jumping out of a window on a skyscraper. Moving on, Danny Casolaro, an investigative reporter that was looking into the Mena Airport in Arkansas Development Finance Authority as he was following the money to the cocaine, out of the blue decided to slit his wrist and kill himself in the middle of his investigation. And then there's Paul Wiltshire, who was actually the partner of Casolaro, who together was investigating the Mena Airport corruption. Only 3 weeks after sending a report to Janet Reno that identified Clinton as one of the main players in the cocaine and gun smuggling through the Mena Airport on June 22, 1993 in Washington, D.C., he was found dead on his toilet, in which he died from, quote, natural causes. So think about that. Both guys that were looking into the cocaine conspiracy at Mena Airport, both guys died. One decided to commit suicide in the middle of the investigation, and the other took a shit and died of natural causes. Does this sound normal to you guys? Any of this sound normal? How about this one? John Parnell Walker, who was the Whitewater investigator for Resolution Trust Corps, decided to jump from his Arlington, Virginia apartment on August 15, 1993. What was the focus of his investigation? The S&L bank that was servicing the Clintons that was shut down after losing $60 million. And then there's Barbara Weiss, who was a Commerce Department staffer that worked closely with Ron Brown. Weiss died on November 29, 1996. Her bruised, naked body was found locked in her office at the Department of Commerce. To this day, her killer has not been identified. And then there's Dr. Stanley Hurd, who is the chairman of the National Chiropractic Healthcare Advisory Committee. He died with his attorney, Steve Dixon, in a small plane crash. In addition to serving on Clinton's advisory council, Dr. Hurd also personally treated Clinton's mother, stepfather, and brother, so he was close to the family. He knew a lot about the Clintons. And we all know the name Barry Seal. I mentioned him before. Tom Cruise played Barry Seal in American Made. How Barry Seal died is actually very interesting. Now remember, he knows all the players in the Mena, Arkansas cocaine smuggling conspiracy. He knows everybody, okay? Well, after Seal was arrested, now check this out. As a modification by the judge to Seal's original plea deal, he was sentenced to work in public service at the Salvation Army facility on Airline Highway US 61 in Baton Rouge. Right in front of that facility, where the judge sent him to be, he was gunned down, assassinated. Where the judge sent him to be, okay? Now, this was a modification of the plea deal. So after the fact, they just changed his location, sent him to a place where he got assassinated. And if you think this can't get any darker, it can. Check this out. Suzanne Coleman, who reportedly had an affair with Bill Clinton when he was the Arkansas Attorney General, died of a gunshot wound to the back of the head. To the back of the head, which it was ruled a suicide. By the way, she was pregnant at the time of her death. Next up is Herschel Friday, who was the Clintons' attorney and one of their primary fundraisers. Herschel died on March 1st, 1994, when his plane exploded. When his plane exploded. And just when you think all this shit can't get any more weird, bizarre, dark, or brutal, then we have the case of Kevin Ives and Don Henry, a 16 and 17-year-old boy who supposedly happened upon the whole cocaine operation when it happened and saw a bunch of stuff they should not have saw. I guess this happened multiple times. Well, eventually it was found out that these kids knew a lot. They knew a lot. They witnessed a lot. Multiple times they watched this operation in action. Well, these kids were found dead on a train track in which they said, oh, they fell asleep. Supposedly they both fell asleep on a train track in Arkansas, and a train came along and just chopped them up. Like, that's supposedly what happened, okay? Now, this is really weird. The following people that I'm going to list off right now, these were people that were directly connected to Kevin Ives and Don Henry that were going to give a testimony in court before a grand jury about what they knew from Kevin Ives and Don Henry, okay? Let's start with Keith McCaskill. He died after he was stabbed 113 times. Gregory Collins died from gunshot to the head, ruled a suicide. Jeff Rhodes, he was shot, mutilated, and found burned in a trash dump in April of '89. James Milan, found decapitated. However, the coroner ruled his death was due to natural causes. And how about Seth Rich, who is the most recent murder in the Clinton body count? Rich was a D.C. staffer that Julian Assange claimed had info on the DNC email scandal connected to Hillary Clinton. Well, on July 10th, Rich was murdered and robbed, in which he was shot in the back 3 times, in which somehow the coroner ruled his death of natural causes. Now, when you say, why would that be? Why would the coroner rule his death of natural causes after being shot 3 times in the back? Well, if his official ruling is that it was of natural causes, then I guess there's no room for an investigation. And I can go on and on and on. But one of the most shocking things that I read is when I think about the people that would be the closest to the Clintons, that would know the most about the Clintons? It would be their bodyguards. It would be either their Secret Service, their bodyguards, the people that are with them 24/7. Well, throughout their career, they've had a number of bodyguards. How many do you think are now dead? How many of Clinton's bodyguards do you think are now dead? I mean, I would think 2 would be a high number, 3 maybe. I mean, 5 would be crazy. 12. 12 former bodyguards of the Clintons are now dead. And when you're a political figure like them, these bodyguards are with you 24/7. They know everything, they hear everything, they see everything. 12 are dead. Major William S. Barclay Jr., Captain Scott J. Reynolds, Sergeant Brian Hanley, Sergeant Tim Sable, Major General William Robertson, Colonel William Dinsberger, Colonel Robert Kelly, Specialist Gary Rhodes, Steve Willis, Robert Williams, Conway LeBleu, and Todd McKeon. They're all dead. In total, there's 47 current bodies, 47 people that were directly connected to the Clintons, either as someone who worked closely with them or as an enemy. 47 are now dead. And as you guys saw, there's a number of them. The majority of 90% of them are mysterious as hell. Gunshot wound to the head, ruled a suicide. That seems to be the number one way. Jumping out of buildings, can you think of a more terrifying way to kill yourself? You know, I mean, how many airplanes explode, but yet they have 4 or 5 people that, died on airplanes? I mean, isn't air travel the safest form of travel known to man? Yet the Clintons know like 5 people that have died. 5 people directly connected to them that have died on airplanes. I mean, it's crazy. And the Barry Seal thing blows me away because, again, the judge gets his plea, and at the last second, the judge changes his plea and decides an exact location that he's going to put him. And the second he lands there, he's assassinated. So why hasn't anybody investigated this? I mean, I even thought of, how many people do I know? Like, in my lifetime, how many people do I know that have died? Well, the highest group of people that I know that have died, there's been like 12 people from my high school that committed suicide in my graduating class of 42. And I think there's something much darker going on there. But outside of that, like in my adult life, I mean, I have lost a lot of friends to drug addiction, but that is admittedly because a lot of my friends from years ago were in the music business, and I was in a hardcore band, and I traveled around and toured around, but that industry is known for drug abuse, okay? So it's not crazy to be like, I know, 13 people that have died from either alcoholism or opiates. Most of it's opiates, and that's more recent. But again, that's from a specific area of people that have a trade where this is very common. These are politicians, and it seems like 3/4 of those deaths are shot in the head, ruled a suicide. It's crazy to me. If I think of how many people I've worked with, when I say how many people have I worked with in my professional adult life, and that really kind of levels it. When I think of how many people have I worked with as a professional, I could think of 3 that are no longer here. 3 that have died. 1 died of a drug overdose, 1 died of a heart attack, and 1 died in a car crash. Drunk driving. All explainable. All completely explainable. The guy that I'm thinking of that died of a drug overdose, he was popping pills and drinking hard liquor. You can't mix whiskey with oxy. I mean, it's going to shut your lungs down. You're going to stop breathing when you go to bed. Period. The guy that I knew that had a heart attack, He was excessively overweight. I mean, like morbidly obese. Smoked a ton, drank a ton. He was on that Chris Farley plight. That's where he was heading. He was as big as Chris Farley and partied like him. So at 46 years old, yeah, he had a heart attack. His heart exploded. Totally explainable. The other guy he worked with that got in a drunk driving accident. A guy just ran red, was drunk, and hit him. It's not just the amount of people that have died around the Clintons. It's the nature in which they're dying. And the bigger question is, why are none of these deaths ruled, murder? Like the one that blows my mind is the one, girl that, is shot and it's ruled a suicide and they found her bags packed, and then her state trooper fiance publicly says that's bullshit, she was murdered. And then the same thing happens to him. He's shot in the head, ruled a suicide at her gravesite. Like that whole thing just seems so staged. This is just terrifying to me because you never want to believe that power like this can be wielded in this fashion. But when I think about it, of course it can. Like Russia, for example. It is well known that in Russia, you do not want to fuck with Putin. You do not want to fuck with people in power in Russia. They will gun you down in the street, straight up, period. So why would any of us, including myself, think that could never happen in America? That could never happen being the most powerful nation in the free world. Of course it can. Of course it does. But America does such a good job of selling us that, the media and the press and the government, that our government is, yeah, they're corrupt. Yeah, they do some shit that's under the table. But there's a line they draw, I mean, George Bush told us, right? They're evildoers. Anybody who's against us is an evildoer. Literally called it an evildoer. It's a really weird time in America right now. A lot of things are coming to light. When I put out Phantom Rider, I think you guys are going to be blown away by the next level of what is going on, in the world of disclosure, UFO disclosure. But I think a lot is going on also with disclosure of secret societies, powerful groups, the family, the New World Order, Jeffrey Epstein, who the Clintons are involved in that fucking thing too. I mean, it's like you don't want to believe that this is possible because either the Clintons are just the most evil motherfuckers alive, or this is just the biggest collection of coincidences ever. And as I've told you guys, I'm not really a believer in coincidences. If I had 5 friends that were blowing up in airplanes, I wouldn't be flying anytime soon. I'd be like, okay, yo, there's something up. Someone's trying to take me out on a plane. I'm not going to be the next one. If suddenly tomorrow, like 20 friends I had died of a gunshot wound to the head, ruled a suicide, I'd be watching my back. I wouldn't be like, oh, it's just a coincidence that all these people I know are shot in the head. That's ruled a suicide. Damn. The more and more you go down these rabbit holes, the more and more terrifying they are, because you start discovering the possibilities of the evil of mankind. And like I said, that's why I wish somebody would come out and speak about this stuff. Like when you hear about Clinton on this plane with, Epstein, flying around with the Lolita Express. Like, if it's nothing, come out and say it. Explain what was going on. Because if you don't, and you hide it all, then, you look guilty as shit. And sending the Clinton body count, like, all of these deaths, like, explain. Like, someone speak about it. And if not, then someone's got to investigate it, man. And it's not going to be me. I'm not a cop. I'm not that guy. But man, I hope somebody out there has got to take this to the mainstream media and try to get, your hands around this. But my guess is, if it's real, anybody who tries to take it to the mainstream media, they better watch their ass, It's just really scary. But is it real? That's the question. I want to know what you guys think. Leave your quotes and comments in the comment box below. Let me know what you guys think. Is there something to this, or is this confirmation bias? Is this basically just picking apart, a certain amount of events and trying to make them fit a narrative? Because I'm not doing that. I'm just looking at these murders, saying, here are their connections, or these deaths, saying, here are the connections, and saying, is there anything weird about it? And to me, there seems to be a whole lot of weird that nobody is investigating right now. So I would love to know what you guys think. As always, thank you for listening to episode number 81 of the In a Crowded Room podcast. I will be back tomorrow with more. All the best.